Hey y'all, my name is Christian. I'm a millennial, and this is the Millennial Mind. Millennials get a bad rap for being lazy, non-productive members of society. They are also told that their opinions are warped and that they don't matter. This podcast is designed to express an opinion, but from a millennial's perspective. We will talk about everything from love and relationships to pop culture to pretty much everything that comes to mind. Come join me on this journey of speaking my mind, and I hope that all of you are speaking your mind as well. This podcast is sponsored by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. Free free. There's also creation tools that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will then distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. I actually use Anchor for this podcast, and it has saved me a lot of time and energy because everything is consolidated in one place. It just makes it so much easier. So if you're interested in doing the same thing, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Once again, you can download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hey y'all, welcome to the premiere episode of the Millennial Mind Season 2. Woo! Oh, I missed you guys. I missed this mic. I missed interacting with you all. I just missed this entire thing. You really don't know what you have until it's gone. Now, I've always enjoyed doing this podcast, but I just needed a little bit of a breaky break. I got the break, and I'm like, I kind of miss doing this. So I'm glad to be back at the mic and doing what I love. So let's get right into it. First of all, before we get into today's episode, hats off to you guys for surviving 2020, okay? 2020 was a crap show of a year. People were dying like flies. People were getting COVID-19. It was just a hot mess, okay? So hats off to you if you survived 2020 and you're now in 2021 like me. Hats off to you because it was a struggle bus of a year. A struggle bus year. That's what it was. Like the little short bus, the little short yellow bus. That's what 2020 was. It was a crap show of a year. Hats off to you for surviving, for pulling through, for pushing your way through. Hats off to you. Now, speaking of COVID-19, I know you guys read the title of this episode and was like, what? And it's true. I caught the vid. I caught COVID. It's a whole story. So this episode is going to be dedicated to my COVID-19 story, okay? So first of all, let me put this out here. A lot of people think that COVID-19 isn't serious because only a small percentage, quote unquote, small percentage of the population is actually dying from COVID-19. But it's serious. It is serious. So make sure you wear your mask, remain 6 feet distance or 6 foot distance from other people. Seriously, because it is serious out here in these streets. COVID-19 ain't playing with nobody, okay? Person ain't playing with nobody. She surely was not playing with me. She was like, you right there, you're my next target. But let me start from the beginning as far as how I got COVID-19, and we'll just go from there. So, one of my uncles, I won't say his name, one of my uncles was sick. He basically had all of the COVID-19 symptoms. So he felt weak, he was feeling achy, he had a fever, just the whole nine. But he never got tested. Never got tested, didn't really quarantine himself. He just thought, oh, I just must be sick. Now, we all know that COVID-19, those are the main symptoms for COVID-19. So if you have those symptoms, even though you may think like, oh, I have the flu, or oh, I just have a regular cold, just get checked out. It's just that much. It doesn't take much. Just get tested. But anyway, my uncle was sick. He then went around my dad. They went out and ran some errands. He was around my dad and didn't tell my dad that he was sick. So then a couple days later, my dad started to feel sick and he looked really weak. So I told my dad, like, you really need to get tested for COVID-19. My dad, he became positive. He tested positive for COVID-19 after he got tested. So when he called and said that he tested positive, that next day, towards the evening, I started to feel real sick. So I started to feel like really congested, I should say. I wasn't having a fever, or I didn't have any aches or pains, didn't have trouble breathing, just it was mostly congestion, and I was starting to sneeze. So I started quarantining since that time. I started quarantining once my dad tested positive for COVID, because I was actually around him in between the time that he spent time with my uncle and the time that he tested positive for COVID-19. So I was like, okay, let me just quarantine regardless. But then when I started to feel sick, I'm like, okay, I should get tested too. So I got tested maybe a couple days after I started to feel congested, and I tested positive. Now, when you get your results and you see positive and COVID-19 in the same sentence, it does something to your psyche. You automatically think about people in the news who are on ventilators, who are having trouble breathing, who are having muscle aches and pains, who are dying. And you're like, oh boy, I'm next. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm young. I haven't really accomplished what I really wanted to accomplish yet. Like I really can't be getting to this point. Like, is this really my life? What I was really concerned about was the people, or were the people rather, that I came in contact with. Or during the time that I had my last contact with my dad, and when I tested positive for COVID-19. So that was cousins who were in contact with people. That was my husband. The list just went on and on and on. So you can see how COVID-19 was a trickle effect. I talked to my doctor after I tested positive. She actually called me probably within an hour or so after I got the results. And she told me to quarantine for 10 days. At first, it was 14. Do you guys remember that? When you first got COVID-19, you had to quarantine for 14 days. Now they reduced it to 10, or at the time I tested positive, they reduced it to 10. Now they're saying, oh, you only have to quarantine 7 to 10 days. I believe I quarantined for about 12 days. My husband also had to quarantine himself too, so he had to take off of work. Thankfully, he still got paid. I know there are some people who probably did not get paid, but thankfully, my husband did get paid, so thank God for that. And when I say that I felt like I had leprosy, like in the Bible, and had to be put away, I felt like I was being put away. My husband was wearing a mask around me all the time. He slept in one room, I slept in another. I couldn't cook because I didn't want to transfer anything to him. It was just a hot mess, okay? I just felt so alone. I felt so alone. I couldn't visit nobody because I had the vid. I didn't want nobody else to catch the vid. It was just a horrible feeling, a horrible thing to go through. But my main concern was making sure that no one else got what I got. So I quarantined. I never had a fever, but had a little bit of shortness of breath. Now, I work out. I work out on a regular basis. So I knew there was actually a couple things that really showed me that something was terribly wrong. One, I couldn't walk up and down my stairs in my house without getting short of breath. That was number one. I just felt like every time I walked up and down the stairs, I felt like I had ran a marathon. I just felt that tired. So I had to like catch my breath every time I participated in that activity. Okay. Usually those stairs were no problem. I would skip up or skip a step, whatever. I'd run up the stairs, run down the stairs. That was just my thing. I couldn't barely walk up the stairs without feeling short of breath. So that was the first thing. The second thing was I'm a shower singer. So I sing in the shower to my husband's demise. I sing in the shower. I just love to do it. I'll sing to Beyonce. I'll sing some gospel music. I'll sing whatever I got playing through Pandora. Okay. So when I'm singing in the shower, I'm doing a full production, full on long notes, the vibrato, all of that. Okay. I could not hold not one single note. Like I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston, could not hold a single note for that song, okay? And usually I could, whether it was off key or not, I held it. It's the attempt that counts, okay? I could not hold those notes. So I'm like, yep, something is terribly wrong. So I had to get to the point where I wasn't feeling like that anymore. And that took some time. My symptoms with the congestion and the shortness of breath, it lasted for a little over 10 days. I would even say that it lasted about 2 weeks. It took me a while to get over. The congestion and the shortness of breath slowly went away. When I got to the point where I felt like the congestion and the shortness of breath wasn't there anymore, I got tested again and tested negative. What I'm thankful for is that the symptoms weren't as bad as they could have been. I was still able to work even with COVID-19. Now, I've been working from home, so that makes it a lot better on numerous levels. But I was still able to work, and it wasn't, my symptoms weren't really interfering with my job. Thankfully, my job would have given me some kind of leave, paid leave, if I wasn't able to work, but my job was pretty straightforward. So I just said, no, I'll just say that in the event something very catastrophic happens, if something catastrophic happens, hopefully it doesn't. But I know at one point there was like this little app that I was signed into that was created by the state. It was where you had to log in your COVID-19 symptoms each day. And there were days, of course, where I logged in that I was short of breath. And so the doctor would call and be like, hey, you should really go to the emergency room. I was like, ugh, I don't want to go. I don't feel like my shortness of breath was that bad where I feel like I need to go to the ER. And plus, I didn't want to pay the $500 bill. That's 95% of it. Now, I should not have done that. Do not do that. Okay. If you're feeling short of breath and you have the COVID-19 symptoms, go to your doctor, whoever you need to go to get help. Do not be like me because I'm not a good example of what you should do. But overall, I'm just thankful that my symptoms were not as bad as they could have been. Anyone is really susceptible to this disease. Now, I'm a pretty healthy person. I just had my physical the month before. All my blood work came back great. My doctor said I was healthy. So it doesn't matter if you're healthy, if you have a good immune system or not. It doesn't matter. Not only did my dad get COVID-19, but my mom got it. And then we had cousins who came from out of town for a couple of weeks. They wound up getting it. It's just a trickle effect. It doesn't matter what your health is like. COVID-19 does not discriminate against nobody. Just because you're familiar with people doesn't mean you shouldn't still be cautious. So I know some people have been hanging around with family and having family gatherings because they feel like they know their family, so they couldn't possibly have COVID-19, which is the worst thing that you could think. You could have COVID-19, or someone in your family could have COVID-19 and could spread it to everyone in your family. That is not what you want to do at all. And that's something that you'll regret for the rest of your life if someone passes away because of something that you could have prevented. So anyone is susceptible to the disease. COVID-19 doesn't discriminate against anyone. If you are diagnosed with COVID-19, it's not necessarily the end of the world. Your mental health is important during this time. Make sure that, if you are able to, if you are physically able to, do some things that you like to do while you're in the house. What I did was I actually downloaded this app called Speako. This is not a sponsored ad. It's not sponsored. This is just a little shout out, but I wanted to improve my speech so that when I come back to you guys, I sound a little better. So I wanted to improve my speech and my delivery. And during my quarantine, I worked on that. I also worked on some branding and just working on some new things in order to provide more content to you all. And that's going to come out soon too. But my mental health was important. Reading my Bible, reading positive quotes, speaking positivity in my life. That's what really helped me to get through that season of my life. But I'm glad I made it. I'm COVID-19 free. My other family members are COVID-19 free. Thankfully, my husband never contracted COVID-19, which is crazy because he was around 3 people who had COVID-19, and that was me and my parents. So, and we just didn't know it at the time. So he never got it. I'm just so thankful that it wasn't as bad as it could have been, and that my husband wasn't affected by it, because that would have been a whole can of worms. But it just shows you that life isn't promised. Life is like a vapor. It's here 1 minute and then it's gone the next. And when you're sick like that, it puts things in perspective. It shifts your priorities. Your priorities are shifted, and you start to determine what is important and what is not. You start not to worry about things that are trivial. You start to focus on things that make you happy. So that was my main focus, and I want to continue that focus throughout this new year. Like I was saying before, 2020 was just crazy. Um, so I hope that this year will be a lot better. So, have any of you guys contracted COVID-19, or did you know someone who contracted COVID-19? What was your experience with that? Let me know in the comments below, or in the show notes rather. You can also send me an email at mindofmillennials@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and rate the podcast. It makes us more visible to new listeners. Make sure you share this podcast with everyone that you know, so that they can get on the Millennial Mind train. And of course, I have a quote for you guys. That's something that's not going to stop because I love quotes. And this quote came from Michael Jordan. And it says, obstacles don't have to stop you. If you run into a wall, don't turn around and give up. Figure out how to climb it, go through it, or work around it. Michael Jordan ain't never lied. So thank you guys for listening to this inaugural episode for season 2 of The Millennial Mind. And until next week, I will see you guys soon.